Hey, what's up, guys? I'm BTC. Blizzard just released a new developer update where Jeff Kaplan talked quite a bit about the new competitive ranked mode in Overwatch. He did give a bunch of information, but they're still holding back a lot of the details, so we're not going to know that stuff until sometime in the near future. But I wanted to give you some of my thoughts on what they're changing, what I liked and what I didn't like. So first, we're going to start with the fact that they're changing the spectate mode, or they're just improving it, basically. Now, for a regular player, this really isn't going to impact you, but it will impact you as a viewer, specifically for the Overwatch tournaments that you may want to watch. Another company, Valve, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, has a game called Dota, and they've made a lot of changes to their spectate/broadcaster mode. And it allows the broadcasters to do lots of cool things. They can show fight recaps with what abilities were used, who took what damage, who got, XP and stuff like that, and gold. Obviously, XP and gold isn't relevant to Overwatch, but it is there. Also, the broadcasters have the ability to, draw on the map. They can draw on the screen in the game, and it just, it adds a whole new level of experience when you're watching these tournaments, where the broadcaster can actually show you, this player, he could go through this path, or he could go through this path, or he could try to, aim for this area or whatever. So there's lots of cool stuff that they could be doing. I don't know exactly what they're going to be improving for the spectate mode in Overwatch. It's probably, right now, it's probably just going to be some more simple stuff, better camera control and things like that. But hopefully we get a much more interesting and detailed experience when we're able to watch these tournaments. So we'll have to see about that. So next up, he said that the competitive is coming at the end of June. And they feel that quick play is the default mess around mode where you can, do whatever you want, kind of silly matchups and, just kind of derp around. And competitive mode is supposed to be more serious and focused. And while this is the intent, you're going to have to remember that there are going to be goofballs in your ranked matches who intentionally pick stupid characters, who just kind of mess around and make you lose the match. And it's going to happen. It's happened in every competitive game ever. So there's really no way to completely avoid that entirely. However, keep in mind, there is an avoid player option in Overwatch. So if you do run into somebody that is being an idiot in your ranked matches, make sure that you go into the little social tab thing, and you can right click on them, and you can tell the game to avoid this player, which means you don't get matched up with that person anymore. So obviously it doesn't stop the first time you run into him, but it will stop from future instances. Next up, they talked about how the beta test feedback was that the ranked mode wasn't quite competitive enough. And he actually talks about this a little bit later, where it was more of a progression versus skill. The problem with the old system was that once you ranked up to the next level, you couldn't de-rank. So it was possible for people like low-skill players, to get carried up to a higher rank, and then they couldn't de-rank, which means those lower skilled players were constantly locked in at a higher rank, and it just, would cause problems for the matches they were in, because they weren't playing against people of an equal skill to them, and they were basically a detriment to their team. So they're going to be changing that. I'll go into that a little bit later here. But he also wanted to mention that the season length is going to be 2.5 months with a break in between. And I believe he said that the break is going to be 2 weeks, which seems a bit long. Now, later in the video, he did say that they're going to use this 2-week time in order to make changes to the competitive rank mode if necessary. But 2 weeks is still a long time. And for those of us that want to play Overwatch in a more serious competitive mode, being forced to go and play quick play, where people just goof around for 2 whole weeks, seems a bit long. Now, a lot of other games, including other Blizzard titles that use a competitive season, like Hearthstone and StarCraft and stuff, as soon as the season is over, the next one begins immediately thereafter. So there's no interruption. With Overwatch, having 2 whole weeks of downtime is probably going to be pretty annoying for a lot of people. I don't know. I mean, I understand that they need to make changes and improvements, especially at the beginning here, because this is going to be, the first couple seasons of Overwatch ranked. They're going to need to make adjustments after each season. Like, this didn't work, therefore we need to get rid of it, or we need to change it, or whatever. I totally understand that. But after the first couple seasons, man, 2 weeks, that seems like an awful long time. I don't know if that's entirely needed. Next thing he talked about was sudden death, and that they feel like it happens way too often, about 35% of the time. So they want to make it a more rare and impactful event when 2 teams have to go to sudden death. Not, every couple matches you end up going to sudden death. They want it to be where if you go to sudden death, it's like a wow, these 2 teams are really closely matched, and they got to go to sudden death to see who's the better team. I totally agree with that. He didn't really say how they're going to limit the amount of sudden death matches you have, because if one team wins one round and then the other team wins the other round, that's still basically, sudden death. So maybe, I don't know, they have to add timers into it, and maybe if both teams are within, 10 seconds of each other or something like that, then you go to sudden death. But he didn't really give too many details on that. Now, another change he mentioned about sudden death, which I don't really know how they're going to do it and still make it fair, is that the matches will now resolve on the map you were playing. So previously, if you were playing on Hanamura, you would play 1 round of defense and then 1 round of offense. If you won one and lost one, it would then go to sudden death, and the sudden death would happen on a different map. It would happen on one of the Nepal maps or one of the Ilios maps. It would be a King of the Hill, and whoever won that basically won the whole thing. Well, now what they're going to do is if you're playing on Hanamura, the sudden death tiebreaker is going to happen on Hanamura. The problem with this is that the assault and the payload maps and stuff are not perfectly 50-50 balanced. Every map has an advantage for one team or the other. So if you're playing on, this map, offense has the advantage. If you're playing on a different map, well, in this case, defense has the advantage. So if you just go to sudden death and you randomly put both teams, one on offense and one on defense, well, depending on what map you're playing on, one of those teams is going to have a natural advantage because of the way the map is designed. So unfortunately, he didn't give much details, but if the only thing they do is throw you into a 3rd round, that's not really good, because it's not going to be balanced. So I don't know how they're going to do that. We'll have to see. He did say that the double cap assault maps, Volskaya, Hanamura, and Anubis, felt too much like a coin flip, and that the maps themselves need to last a lot longer, with more opportunity for a back and forth kind of fight, where, like with the payload maps, if the defending team is able to secure the payload, they can actually roll it back in the map. But with the assault maps, there really is no way to roll the attack back, so I'm not really sure what they're going to do with this. I don't think they're going to allow the defense team to recap like point A, but what might actually end up happening is whenever you go to capture a point in one of these maps, there are 3 little indicators on the capture thing. And once your team captures up to that point, like the 3rd marker, you can't roll it back. So it's always going to be at that 3rd. So maybe what they'll do is if a defending team is able to hold a point for a certain amount of time, they can kind of break that little third point, you know, the little marker that says you can't roll back, and maybe they'll actually be able to like uncap a point to a certain amount, you know? But that'll probably require them to hold the point for like maybe 2 or 3 times as long as the attackers would need to actually capture it. So if it takes 10 seconds to cap the point, or excuse me, to cap that one little third of the point, then the defenders probably would need to take like 20 seconds or so to kind of uncap that point. I don't know. We'll have to see. So finally he gets to the good stuff, and he talks about how the new system is actually going to work. Under the old system, you would win a couple matches, you rank up, you can't derank. It didn't really give you a good idea of where you were skill-wise compared to everybody else. The new system, everybody's going to have a skill rating, and this is going to be between 1 and 100. And this numerical value will tell you where you are compared to everybody else that's playing ranked Overwatch. You win matches, you go up in rank. You lose matches, you go down in rank. Whenever you join a game, you'll be able to see the rating of everybody that's in that game. It'll also show you the average rating for both teams, and it'll show you who's grouped up. So if you're going against an enemy team that's a full pre-made, you'll know right away. Now, the way it's going to work is you get points for winning the match, and you lose points for losing the match. If your team has a lower rating than the other team, basically you're the underdog, you will get more points for winning and lose less points for losing. Now, while all of these changes are definitely improvements over the old system, Blizzard is still going to use a glaringly bad aspect of the MMR system, and that is they're going to completely ignore individual performance. If you win matches, you gain points. If you lose matches, you lose points, and that's it. It doesn't matter that you completely carried your team. It doesn't matter that you were way heads and shoulders above everybody else in the match. If your team manages to throw the match somehow, you still lose points. Individual skill should be taken into account for an individual MMR rating. It just doesn't make sense to have your individual MMR rating based not on how well you do, but how well your team does. Now, I understand that this would make the entire system more complex, because you'd have to take into account kills versus deaths and capture time and amount of healing done and all that sort of stuff. But really, if you're going to make a good system that shows an individual player skill and individual rating, it should be based on that player, not on the teams that player has been on. Now, the good players are still going to bubble up to the top of the rankings. But the funny thing is, one of the criticisms of the old system was that it was too grindy. Well, with this new system, it's still gonna be grindy, because it's not based on your individual performance. You have to be able to drag your teams across the finish line in order to get more points to rank up. So if it was based on individual performance, you could probably get a high ranking within 5 or 10 games, but because you are now forced to drag your teams along with you, it's actually going to take you 20 or 30 games to rank up. So it's still possible, and it's still a grind. It's just a different kind of grind. And the last thing he talked about was the rewards for the competitive ranked play. And he made a point to quickly say that everything will be purely cosmetic. There's not going to be any health or damage bonuses to anything that you get from the ranked play, because that would just imbalance the game and ruin the ranked play. People who manage to get these better weapons would always have an advantage, and that's just not what they want to do. That's why everything in Overwatch is always going to be purely cosmetic. So some of the rewards are going to be like icons and sprays and that sort of thing, and a lot of people are going to be able to get some of the more common rewards, but the highest ranked players in the competitive mode are going to get the most rare and the most unique items, including a golden gun system that they were talking about. Now, if you don't know, the golden gun is from the James Bond series, and in the games, the golden gun can kill anybody in one hit no matter what. It's like a god weapon, basically. Now, if you get golden guns in Overwatch, again, purely cosmetic. They're not actually going to do any extra damage or anything like that. That would just be absolutely ridiculous to have like a golden gun Bastion who can just one-shot everybody on the field. That would be even more cancer than it already is in the game right now. So you don't have to worry about any of that, but the cosmetics are going to be the rewards. This was pretty much what I expected them to do. I didn't expect them to do any sort of power shifts or anything like that, but overall, my thoughts on the entire new competitive system is it's definitely an improvement, certainly. But the one thing that I don't like is that it's going to be based on your team's performance instead of your individual performance. That's something that's always bothered me in any competitive game that used that system. And not all of them use that system. Some of them do take into account your individual performance, and they use that as your ranking. And I really wish that Overwatch would do this. I don't think they're ever going to. I think it's just the easy way out for them to simply say, your team wins, you get points, your team loses, you lose points. And then they don't have to worry about any of the other stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, I've had games where I played as Roadhog, and I got golds across the board. That means I got more kills than the McCree, I got more capture time than the Reinhardt, I even did more healing than the Mercy. And yet my team still manages to throw the match somehow. And, you know, according to this new system, I would lose points for that. And it just doesn't really make sense. I don't really like that system, but unfortunately, I think that's pretty much the system we're going to end up having for pretty much the entire life of Overwatch. I don't think they're going to go to an individual system at all, ever, unfortunately. But anyways, so what do you guys think of the changes? Let me know in the comment section below. Certainly would appreciate it if you share the video. Subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching. Remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault.